I was standing in my kitchen when my phone started vibrating on the counter. Not ringing, not chiming, just that dull, insistent buzz that feels more like a warning than a notification. The room was quiet, too quiet. No TV, no music, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. The kettle hadn't started screaming yet. The water wasn't even boiling. And somehow, I already knew this message was going to change everything. I picked up the phone. One sentence. No emojis, no softening language, no explanation. Either you tell her the truth, or I will. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Not because I was scared of being exposed, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I understood immediately what this really was. This wasn't a request. This wasn't a conversation. It was a threat. I leaned against the counter and felt something cold spread through my chest. Not panic, not anger, but clarity. The kind that hits you when the puzzle pieces finally lock into place and you realize the picture you were looking at the whole time was upside down. This wasn't about honesty. It wasn't about boundaries. It wasn't even about me. It was about power. Because the truth she wanted told wasn't hers to tell. It wasn't something that needed to be corrected or exposed. It wasn't harm being prevented. It was private. It was sensitive. And it belonged to someone who had done absolutely nothing wrong. An innocent person. Someone quiet. Someone shy, someone who moved through the world like she was always trying not to take up space. And the woman I was dating, the woman I thought I knew, was willing to emotionally detonate that person's sense of safety just to prove she could. Just to win. The realization hit me like vertigo. I replayed the last few months in my head. Every principled stance, every moral high ground, every moment where compassion somehow got reframed as betrayal if it didn't serve her. All those times I'd admired her conviction, and suddenly I saw the pattern. Loyalty tests disguised as ethics, ultimatums framed as honesty, control masquerading as righteousness. My phone buzzed again in my hand. Another message, shorter this time. I'm serious. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, pulse racing. Because I understood the trap. If I complied, I would become the villain. If I resisted, she would become the hero, at least in her own story. And either way, someone else would get hurt. Someone who didn't consent to being a pawn in this game. I thought about my apartment, about how peaceful it finally become, about how rare it is to feel emotionally safe in your own home. And I thought about what it would mean to betray that peace, not out of necessity, but out of fear. That's when I realized something else. This was a test, not of honesty, of character. And the outcome was already clear. So I made a decision right there in that quiet kitchen, before the kettle ever boiled, before the clock ticked another minute forward. I chose not to play. I chose not to sacrifice someone else to preserve a relationship that required cruelty as proof of loyalty. I chose something far more dangerous. I chose brutal, nuclear honesty. A choice that would end my relationship, expose exactly who she was, and leave her with no leverage, no audience, and no one left to threaten. And the moment I sent that message, everything changed. If you've ever been pressured to betray your values, if you've ever been given an ultimatum that felt wrong in your bones, or if you've ever watched someone reveal their true nature when they didn't get their way, hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. Because this isn't just a breakup story. This is a story about nuclear honesty and how sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply letting someone talk long enough to expose themselves. I didn't realize how traumatized I was by bad roommates. until the apartment finally went quiet. Not the eerie kind of quiet, the kind that rings in your ears and makes you feel exposed. Not the kind that makes you wonder what's about to happen next. This was a different kind. A calm that didn't lean forward. A calm that didn't ask to be managed. A calm that existed whether or not I was performing correctly. The realization came to me in the most unremarkable way possible. I was standing in the kitchen, barefoot on cool tile, waiting for water to boil. My phone sat face down on the counter. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't bracing for interruption. I wasn't listening for footsteps or measuring the distance between sounds. Nothing was happening. No one stomped down the hallway with the aggressive confidence of someone who believed the apartment belonged to them more than anyone else. No television rattled the walls through cheap speakers. No bass line from someone else's playlist pulsed through the floor like a threat. There were no notes taped to the fridge. No all-caps reminders about dishes. No passive-aggressive smiley faces that somehow made everything worse. I waited for the kettle to scream and noticed instead that my shoulders had dropped, that my jaw wasn't clenched, that my breathing had slowed on its own. I exhaled and realized I'd been holding my breath for years. Before this place, every apartment had felt like a negotiation that never quite ended, a fragile truce, a ceasefire that could collapse over something as small as a dirty pan or an unanswered text in the group chat. I learned to track footsteps the way prey animals track predators. I knew which roommate walked heavily when they were angry and which one slammed doors without realizing it. I learned the difference between normal noise and the noise that meant someone was building toward confrontation. I could tell from the way a cabinet closed whether I was about to be accused of something. I lived in a constant state of low-grade alertness. There were roommates who believed dishes were a shared responsibility, but only when they weren't theirs. There were arguments about utilities that somehow turned into character assessments. There were accusations disguised as jokes and jokes that landed like warnings. There were strangers sleeping on couches without warning, loud laughter at 2 a.m, the sound of intimacy happening 10 feet away while I stared at the ceiling, calculating how many hours of sleep deprivation I could survive before my brain started misfiring. Home never felt neutral. It felt conditional, like good behavior bought temporary safety, like silence was currency, like being easy to live with was the price of peace. So, when I moved into this 3-bedroom apartment, I promised myself I'd be smarter. Cordial, not close. Friendly, not familiar. Present, but not emotionally available. I wouldn't repeat the mistake of assuming that shared space meant shared emotional labor. At first, there were 3 of us. It was fine. Not good, not bad, just uneventful. The kind of arrangement you forget about because nothing goes wrong. Everyone paid rent on time, no one screamed, no one cried in common spaces. Then, a few months in, one roommate moved out. No explosion, no dramatic farewell, no group chat meltdown. Just a new job in another city and a U-Haul that appeared one weekend and disappeared by Monday. Suddenly, it was just me and her. She was 29, older than me by a few years. She had a voice so soft you had to lean in to hear it. The kind of person who flinched when someone laughed too loudly nearby. The kind who apologized before asking questions that didn't require apology. She took the larger bedroom. It made sense financially. We agreed to split the extra rent until we found someone new. No rush, no Craigslist panic, no forced optimism. We both said the same thing, almost word for word. Let's just wait for the right person. But instead of urgency, something unexpected happened. The apartment settled. There were no slammed doors, no territorial dominance of the living room, no background noise bleeding into every corner of the space. She didn't play music loudly. She didn't talk on speakerphone. She didn't treat shared space like a stage. Some days I barely saw her. She moved through the apartment like a careful guest, even though it was her home too. She cleaned as she went, wiping down counters after herself, stacking dishes neatly in the drying rack like they were being judged. She cooked late at night, quietly, as if sound itself were something she might inconvenience. And then there was the food. At first, it was subtle. A container in the fridge that wasn't mine, something warm and homemade when I'd been surviving on instant noodles and caffeine. No note, no announcement, no, hey, I made extra. Just there. During exam weeks, when my brain felt scraped raw and my body ran on stress hormones, I'd open the fridge and find something nourishing waiting. It felt unreal, like the apartment itself was looking after me. I never asked her why. I never thanked her directly, because I understood the rule we were both following. Don't make things weird. This wasn't emotional avoidance, it was mutual respect. We didn't overshare, we didn't force intimacy just because our lives intersected spatially. We existed alongside each other, gently, intentionally. And for the first time in years, I felt safe in my own home. Not just physically, emotionally. That peace felt fragile, precious, earned. And somewhere in the back of my mind, without fully admitting it, I knew I would protect it at all costs. The first time it happened, I didn't understand what I was hearing. I was half asleep, phone glowing faintly in the dark, scrolling without reading, the kind of mindless movement you do when your brain is too tired to form thoughts, but not tired enough to shut down. The apartment was quiet in that late-night way, where even ordinary sounds feel invasive. Pipes knocking, someone shifting in bed, the wind pressing against the windows like it wanted in. At first, I thought it was mechanical, a fan, a distant TV, a weird echo traveling through the vents. Then my brain caught up. Oh, my stomach dropped so fast it felt physical, like missing a step on the stairs. The sound wasn't loud, it wasn't explicit, it was muted, distant, filtered through walls and vents, but unmistakably human. Intimate. My skin heated instantly, even though I was alone. I froze. Not out of curiosity, not out of interest, out of panic. Because I knew immediately that if she knew, it would devastate her. This wasn't someone who moved loudly through the world. This was someone who folded inward when attention landed on her, someone who apologized for existing in shared spaces. Telling her would mean forcing her to confront something she believed was private, something deeply personal, something she had no reason to think crossed boundaries. And for what? She wasn't doing anything wrong. This was her room, her body, her life. I lay there, heart racing, hyper-aware of every architectural flaw in the building. The vents, the thin walls, the way sound ignores human intentions. I imagined knocking on her door. The confusion, the horror, the shame blooming across her face. Then I imagined the aftermath, the silence, the withdrawal, the move-out notice. Because shy people don't confront, they retreat. So I made a choice. I said nothing. I moved where I slept. I used white noise. I treated it the same way you'd treat overhearing a neighbor through an apartment wall. An accident, not a transgression. In my mind, telling her would have been selfish. Silence felt kinder. My girlfriend had always been intense, not explosively, quietly, focused, principled, unyielding. She cared deeply about loyalty, boundaries, and something she called respect. At first, I admired that. It felt grounded, adult, like moral clarity in a world that often avoided it. Until it didn't. She came over one weekend while I was buried in exams. We lay in bed, exhaustion blurring edges, conversation loose and unguarded. The kind of space where things slip out because you forget to armor yourself. I joked about how old buildings carry sound in strange ways. And then, without realizing what I was doing, I told her. The silence was immediate. Not confusion, not curiosity. Calculation. "What do you mean you can hear her?" I tried to minimize it. "Barely, sometimes. It's not a—" Her body stiffened. "And you didn't tell me?" I laughed nervously. "Why would I?" She sat up. "So you're just listening to another woman?" My stomach twisted. "That's not— No, I'm not listening. I'm overhearing." She shook her head slowly. "That's cheating." She wasn't joking. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. The story in her head had already been written. Once the accusation existed, everything shifted. She wasn't trying to understand. She was building a case. Every explanation became an excuse. Every nuance became deflection. She accused me of protecting my roommate, of choosing another woman, of being complicit simply by not intervening. Then she said it. "Well, maybe I should tell her." The words landed cold. "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not." "Why not?" she asked sweetly. "If it's not a big deal." Because it was a big deal for someone who didn't consent to being part of this conversation. So her feelings matter more than mine? And I understood then. This wasn't about honesty. It was about control. That night, I didn't sleep. I saw my future clearly. A series of loyalty tests disguised as morality, compassion framed as betrayal, boundaries turned into weapons. I picked up my phone and typed the sentence that ended everything. "If you tell her, we're over." She didn't back down, so I followed through. I ended it, calmly, decisively. Then I did the thing she never expected. I told my roommate. Privately, kindly, without shame. She blushed, but she didn't break. She thanked me. She stayed. The peace stayed. And the relationship that tried to weaponize honesty, it didn't. My ex, she exploded, called me heartless, called me manipulative. But something beautiful happened. She had no audience, no leverage, no power. She revealed herself, and there was nothing left to threaten. Meanwhile, my apartment stayed peaceful, my conscience stayed clean, and my self-respect intact. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's choosing not to become the villain someone wants you to be. And sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is refuse to participate in cruelty. If this story hit home, smash that like button. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been given an ultimatum that revealed someone's true nature? And don't forget to subscribe to Taking Revenge Hour for more emotionally satisfying, justice-fueled stories just like this.